Hey there guys, it's DMO73 bringing you the fifth part of my Moon Priestess Returns set review. We're talking about the Darkness cards today, so let's just go ahead and jump right in. We have the ruler is Fiend of Dark Pyre. It is the demon, essentially, form of the Little Red the Wolf Girl, or I guess what it truly was. Pay 0 is its to activate, but you can only play it if you played a Cthulhu into the field this turn. So much in the same way that Little Red can only be played if you played a Moon this card you have to put a Cthulhu into the field. And it turns into Nyarlathotep. I'm going to say that. Nyarlathotep, the Faceless God. So then its effect is enter, your opponent chooses and banishes a non-Cthulhu resonator, so they have to pick something on their side of the board and immediately kill it. And then its continuous effect is this card's attack is equal to the total attack of all Cthulhu resonators you control. So the more bodies you have on board that are Cthulhus, the more painful this card can become. So yeah, that's pretty, I mean, it's interesting. It's definitely a very unique kind of effect, and definitely requires him to be very well synergized with the cards in the deck, which I like a lot, but we'll just have to see kind of what comes out of it. Jumping right into resonators, we have our first is Acolyte of Darkness, a 2-drop human 4/4. If you use him for an incarnation effect, you can pay 400 life, and if you do, draw a card. I wish this was like 200 life. 400 is a lot of life to spend just to draw a card, but I can see some benefit in it, and it definitely fits with the whole like human sacrifice thing. I just wish that it was 200 instead of 4 to draw that card. That would make this card a lot better, but as it stands, it's pretty decent. Then we have Byakhee, the Winged Lady. 5-drop, but you can pay 2 Darkness resonators, banish them instead of paying the 5. 9/9 flying. You can tap her, essentially, to give her stats and flying to something else this turn. So if she gives 900 and flying till something else, but if that resonator for any reason is excuse me, if that resonator for any reason is killed during that turn, then you also use Byakhee. Pretty huge. Personally, I would just rather swing in with Byakhee and deal the extra damage, but I suppose there are some situations where that could be helpful. I don't know quite yet, but it's a pretty interesting effect either way. Or maybe, you know, Byakhee gets locked down and make her unable to attack, then I guess you're still kind of getting in that damage. So that kind of makes sense, I guess. But other than that, not a huge fan. Hide the Chaos. I talked about Jekyll, the Order in the light section, and I talked about these guys in my preview spoiler article stuff. So 2-drop, 500 human. Hits the board, your opponent loses 200 life. Pay a light and banish her to search for Jekyll, put it into your field, trigger its enter ability, and shuffle your deck. Again, that kind of trading off and on and off of those cards that keeps kind of keeping each other safe while at the same time doing some burn and gain to you and your opponent. So pretty interesting mechanic. Next trick we have the King in Yellow. It's a Cthulhu avatar 2-drop. When this card is put into your graveyard from the field, search your main deck for a King in Yellow, reveal it, put it into your hand. So the whole point of this is to kind of recycle itself to be used with incarnations or other kinds of effects off the board to kind of give Darkness chump blocks as well, so it doesn't necessarily have to rely on blue. A lot of these cards are making it so that blue doesn't have to be relied on as a lot, which is really happy for me, because then I don't have to put Cheshire Cats in every single deck. So I think this is going to be an interesting card that's going to be pretty important for Darkness, especially with all the incarnation and sacrificing that the series is doing with Cthulhu's. Then we have simple 1-drop Phantasm of Void, but if you control 0 the Magus of Nul, which is a different resonator, then it actually is free. So if you have 0 on your side of the board and you have 4 of these in your hand, ta-da! 4 free resonators. I think that's pretty cool, giving black a 1-drop that doesn't, you know, have major downsides. I think is pretty awesome. So I'm interested to see kind of what plays happen with this. Again, with that incarnation stuff, being able to play a bunch of these all at once to be able to have fodder for your incarnations would be really, really helpful. And then we have Shantak, the other 1-drop. It's 200/200 Cthulhu. If it's put into your graveyard from the field, you can discard a card, and if you do, put it from your graveyard into your hand. So you can kind of like recycle it. Cthulhus are going to work a lot in the graveyard, and so Shantak is going to help you try to get those big, dangerous cards out of your hand and into the graveyard where you want them to be. So that'll be pretty interesting as well. Again, with those, a lot of incarnation effects. So you're going to be discarding, you're going to be tributing Shantak for incarnations a lot. Then we have Sheharyar, Distrust King. 3-drop Nightmare Human. At the end of your turn, if no Resonator you control attacked this turn, banish another Resonator. AKA, don't play him first. Play him after you already have creatures on the board, because it doesn't matter how many Resonators attacked, you just have to attack at least once in order to keep him on board. A 3-drop 900/700 is a pretty big body. You just want to make sure that on the turn you play him, you can have something else attack so that you don't start losing stuff right away. Then we have Yog-Sothoth, the Dark Myth, the first of the 2 supers for Darkness. Its incarnation effect is you pay at least 1 darkness, and then 2 more that are either fire or darkness. So 3 creatures total have to be sacked for this guy, but he's an 8-drop by himself, so pretty measly by comparison to his real cost. Cthulhu Resonator, 1500/1500. He's got Pierce, so all of that damage, if it gets blocked, just destroys stuff. And then enter, destroy all Resonators with total cost 2 or less. So, think about it this way. You can play this guy on turn 3 if you're playing a lot of 1-drops. Better yet, you can play him on turn 2 if you play a 1-drop black on turn 1 and then 2 1-drops fire or red on turn 2. Sack all 3 of them. Ta-da! Yog-Sothoth. You have a 1500/1500 with Pierce on turn 2. That's really good. I think this guy is definitely made for more specifically like board wipes in response to your opponent doing something. But either way, this is a huge creature with a huge effect that's going to make Cthulhu's really powerful. Plus, the fact is that, think about it this way, you can play this guy on turn 3 without having to tap for mana for your for Fiend of Dark Pyre. Then flip Fiend of Dark Pyre over here, and suddenly Fiend of Dark Pyre is a 1500/1200, and your opponent has nothing on board because they probably only played 2-drops. Early game beatdown, like that's going to be pretty interesting. I think that is going to be a pretty important play for Darkness. Then we have Zero, the Magus of Nul. We talked about her a little bit before, mentioned her before. 3-drop with Quick Cast. She's a human from the 6 Sages. 700/500. Quick Cast means that you can summon her during either player's turn. Whenever you would have the ability to play a spell chant instant, you can play 0 from your hand. Enter. Every Resonator your opponent controls gains -200/-200, so they lose attack and defense, and they lose any instances of flying that they might have until the end of the turn. So, your opponent tries to make some cool plays with Rapunzel or Gilderai or whatever. Nope, just take away their flying and everything's all good. So I think that's pretty awesome. Pretty cool card that's going to help Darkness out a lot, I think. Moving on to the spells, we have Awakening at the End, a 4-drop spell chant. Give everything -700/-700. So a spell board wipe. This is going to be, I think, a really good side deck card, especially if you're running any kind of Darkness and you run up against, so say you're not playing Cthulhu, and you have some Darkness mana teched in, and you run up against a huge aggro deck. Ta-da! Awakening at the End. I can just still wipe the board in game 2 and game 3 to keep my presence up there. So this is a really cool card, I think, that is going to make Darkness even more powerful than it already was. Black Miasma, spell chant instant. Target resonator, if it's darkness, gains plus 300, 300. Otherwise, it gains minus 300, 300. So, spot removal, spot additional damage, all kinds of stuff that I think it's pretty standard. I wouldn't necessarily say it's groundbreaking, but it is a pretty cool card, I think. That would be quickly cited out if you find out you're playing against a darkness card deck, because you wouldn't want to give your opponent's creatures its own 300, 300. Call of Cthulhu. Look at him there. He's like, I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you. This is a 2-drop spell chant standby. When you have 5 or more Cthulhu cards in your graveyard, put target Cthulhu card from your graveyard into your field. Not a spell, so it would have to be a addition or a resonator, but just bam, put it in there for free. So load up your graveyard really quick with cards that make you discard, or stuff like, not Byakhee, but like Acolyte of Darkness or Shantak. Like fill up your graveyard really fast, and then pull out one of your big creatures really quickly and for free with Call of Cthulhu. It's not going to trigger any enter abilities, but it's still going to be a really important card that I think is going to do a lot. Then we have Void Blast. Darkness spell costs 3, but if you control Magus of Nul, 0 the Magus of Nul, it only costs 1 dark. Just banish something from the game. No big. Just spot removal for dark again, regardless of any kind of type. So things to play in addition to stoning to death, so that's good. That'll be an interesting card, I think, that's going to see some fun play. And again, it's going to be heavily dependent on you having 0, but if you have 0, it pretty much makes stoning to death obsolete. Then we have Bind of Gravity. It's an addition. When it enters, you rest the resonator that it was added to, and the resonator that it was added to cannot recover during the recovery phase. And then you can pay 3 will to actually recover it. Now, it doesn't remove the card, and just makes it so that you have to pay 3 and you can recover it for that turn. So keep that in mind. Also, the flavor text, shut up kids, like get off my lawn, like that's pretty funny. This essentially just makes it a huge investment for your opponent to even be able to continually use one resonator on their side of the board. And I think that's pretty important for Darkness to be able to have that kind of locking down, like cheap lockdown ability to use on their opponent. Then we have Black Moon. It's the newest Moon Field Edition. 2 black, 2 colorless. At the beginning of your main phase, put target Cthulhu non-spell card from your graveyard into your field. So, free Cthulhu monster every single turn, and it has swiftness until the end of the turn. And then, if it would leave your field this turn, so if it was going to die that turn, you'd remove it from the game. But at the end of the turn, you remove it from the game anyway. And then, when this card is put into a graveyard from your field, you lose 1,000 life. So it's kind of risky in the fact that if your opponent has some quick addition removal, you're going to get burned for that. But if they don't, or if you can manage to cancel it, then you're going to get free cards every single turn from your graveyard. That's pretty cool, I think. And again, with that graveyard recursion that we're going to see a lot in Cthulhu, it's a pretty cool synergy card. Shining Trapezahedron, Darkness, 2-drop, Field Edition. Cthulhus you control gain 200, 200. So extra bonus damage for all your Cthulhus, as well as extra defense. And then pay a black Darkness and just banish that card, and then mill 5. Again, we've talked before about wanting to mill cards from your deck a lot with Cthulhus, and this is going to be one of your biggest ways to do that if you don't have cards in your hand to like use incarnations with. Just ta-da, an extra, like finish your turn off, doing all the extra damage you want, and then pay a black Darkness, banish it, and mill 5 so that you're set up for next turn. I think that's really cool, really unique. Milling is a concept that we haven't really seen a lot in this deck, in this game so far. So the fact that the Cthulhu deck is kind of making that its theme is really interesting to me. I like it a lot. And then the last card for Darkness is Yellow Sign. It is a 2-drop, 1 Darkness, 1 colorless Resonator Edition. It gets added Resonator, gets minus 300, 300, so some stat minuses. And at the end of the turn, yellow sign deals 300 damage to the added Resonator's controller. So this does two things. You put it on one of their big creatures, the threats, and make it less of a threat, while at the same time forcing your opponent to make a decision about whether or not they want to try and keep using it. If they keep using it, then they're going to take 300 damage every turn. If they have to try and get rid of that and they don't want to deal with that damage, then they have to get rid of a monster that was considered a threat. So this is a really interesting card, I think, that's going to make your opponent forced to choose between a burn game or losing a big important card on their board, creating an opening for you to play on your turn. So I think this is going to be a really cool card. Might even replace Slippers of Cinderella, I think, in my book, just because it's also, but again, Slippers of Cinderella is a 1-drop, so who knows. I just think it's going to be an interesting card that is going to be pretty useful for black to deal with those kind of problem cards. So that is it for Darkness, guys. That is the 5th episode of this series covering MPR. Go ahead and click on the annotations around the video or down the links down in the description to be taken to the other sections. And as always, guys, this is DMO73 signing off.